A quick tip for drawing trees before we start is when we have the outline of a tree, try and avoid doing a line like this, which often is really a symbol for how we think the outside edge of a tree looks. An actual observation of the particular tree we're drawing, which will be impacted by exactly how large the tree is, what shape the leaves are, and how they attach to the twigs, and how far we are from the tree. So I start with more of a dot dash line for the top of the tree canopy. Now, I'm not too caught up with keeping the tree exactly the same as it is, particularly in what's going to be for me a very fast 10-minute sketch. It turned out that it actually took me 15 minutes to draw this in real life, and because I was wanting to keep these beginners videos closer to 10 minutes, I have sped this up to 1.5 times drawing speed, but it is very repetitive, and I didn't think anything was going to be lost by keeping it moving at a slightly faster pace. Now, the thing I want you to notice is that I'm not actually drawing the tree particularly. I'm much more frequently drawing the shadows that are being cast by the tree, or the parts of the tree that are in shade. A tree canopy is a lot of ends of branches that are covered in leaves that create this fairly fuzzy effect. And that does create a problem when we have a line to draw them with. And it's somehow made more complicated by the fact that we know this canopy is made up of millions of leaves, or at least hundreds of thousands of leaves, and somehow we feel we need to draw them or represent all these edges of leaves in some way. And I think it's much more helpful to think of a tree as a surface, as a fuzzy surface, a fuzzy textured surface that we need to create the effect of with our line work. And the most obvious thing about a tree canopy is usually the shadows, as well as the overall shape and the way the leaves are held on the ends of the branches. Some trees are like a giant ball and you can't see through any of the leaf canopy. Other trees, particularly say our Australian gum trees, are big balls of leaf that can be spread quite far apart, and so lots of blue sky can be seen between these large sections of leaves. But I chose a tree that was a bit in between. There are a couple of patches where we can see the blue sky through, and we can actually see the silhouettes of some branches, so it's important to try and capture that in our scene. It's much easier in a painting where we have this wonderful, brilliant blue sky to represent, to show all of these holes that are punched through the canopy. It's a bit harder with line to know exactly what's sky and what's a bit of leaf canopy that we haven't put darker tonal value on. But you can see how the important part is the edges, is the silhouette, particularly down here where the leaves are hanging. And what we want to try and do is avoid having a mark, a line that could be mistaken for a leaf, unless we want it to represent a leaf, unless the scale of the tree in our scene is such that that could be a leaf. Because otherwise we change the scale of our tree, usually to make a large tree smaller. However, this is a very modest sized tree, so I'm not so concerned about that. But I'm wanting to capture these arcs of shadow that we see, particularly through approximately halfway down the canopy. The sun is almost directly overhead, and so that affects where the bulk of the shadows are, and they're on the lower part, the underside, if you like, of the canopy mostly, or they're on the part of the canopy that's on the far side of the tree, but which we can see through gaps of the canopy on our side. It really is a lot of back and forth, and you can see my approach is to really use dots and dashed lines to represent the top of the sections of leaves, and then really draw those in more though through the negative space of the shadows on the lower part, on the underside of these big leaf clusters that make up the canopy. It's often helpful to stand back too and keep a sense of the overall shape of the tree, particularly again, as I said, that outer edge, that silhouette edge. Some trees have very distinctive overall shapes, and it's important that we capture those. Not so much this type of small tree, but with some trees, that is a very distinctive, distinguishing mark. So now I come out on the right-hand side. It's about now I'm realizing that I've basically taken my 10 minutes completely already. So I am moving faster and with brisker, quicker lines that probably start to become a little bit larger as well. It's important with all this canopy work not to forget the trunks and to try and capture the scale, the shaping, the branching if appropriate, and also exactly how the trunk connects into the ground. Tree trunks very seldom go straight down as two parallel lines. It's always important to resist drawing the trunk outlines before we've actually had a good look at our reference to see how does this particular tree enter the ground. Where does it go out? Where does it go in? What sort of roots do we see above ground? We can't start to draw a line on the paper until we've looked at those things already. Now, there is more shadow on the right-hand side underneath, so I'm trying to quickly represent that. I actually painted trees in oils for 10 years before I started drawing. And I think trees were one subject where that really had a lot of benefit for me then when I began to draw them, because I did see trees and tree canopies in terms of tonal values rather than line. And so when I began to draw them, I wasn't too confused or overwhelmed with how I represent hundreds of thousands of leaves with line. I sought to recreate the tonal values that I used to create with colour, with line, with hatching. But it's also helpful, I think, to try and keep the hatch lines moving in the direction of the canopy where possible. So now I'm working on the tree trunks. Because the sun is overhead, the trunk is pretty much completely in shadow. And so now just filling in some of the more open spaces at the top. It's important not to fill in all of our open spaces with more little shadows and things. It can be hard to keep things looking random. It's really important to leave some larger sizes where there's just white paper showing through. This is a fairly thick pen for me. It's a 0.5mm pen, which was challenging to create a little bit of a lighter effect with some of these canopy details. And I'm starting to look at the overall shape too, and thinking that the tree looks a bit lopsided. There's a bit too much now on the right hand side for what's on the left hand side. So trying to darken up some of these shadow areas. Thicken the trunk a little bit. If it's not quite right, fix it. Now, a little bit of shadow on the ground because the sun is overhead really gives it a much stronger sense of realism. Never forget to put shadows, particularly on hot sunny days. I think by now I've realized that I'm going to have to speed this up a little bit to keep it as short as I want it to be. Just checking some of the edges. G'day, I'm Steve and Travers. I hope you found this interesting. If you want to have a go drawing this particular tree, then the photo is posted on my YouTube channel community page. You can print off a copy and have a go. But whatever you're drawing, however you're drawing it, make sure you have fun. Just putting that last little bit on. And I'll see you next time. Bye.